This is Love Life, and I'm Dr. Babe. I'm very excited to finally start this show. I'm hoping this will get us talking about things a bit differently, as I sense a momentum of progressive thinking and openness in the air, and I really want to help nurture it by encouraging full expression and authenticity. Love Life is about challenging the status quo and welcoming honest self-expression. I want us to have a dialogue about social issues from varied perspectives. Even my perspective has shifted in the last few years, and this forum will hopefully provide an opportunity for some of you to find a more authentic voice as well. Today's show is on the double standard and challenging male and female stereotypes. Did you see the story from June about the conservative mother who tweeted a picture of 2 ham sandwiches in an effort to slut-shame Taylor Swift? The picture had one sandwich with ham spilling out that was supposed to represent Taylor's vagina, and the other one was all neatly tucked away, which represented her daughters. Now, those against Taylor's dating habits as a role model to young girls supported the woman for calling her out, while others were infuriated at her post for its inaccurate explanation of female anatomy and her judgment of Taylor's love life. This clearly perpetuates the double standard further because men don't get shamed for frequently dating, but women do. My vantage point always seems to be heavily focused on sexuality and relationships, but our guest today may see it from a different angle. So let's see where he takes us. Today's guest is Tom McCallum, and I'm really interested to hear a male perspective about the double standard of masculine and feminine stereotypes. Hello again, everybody. I'm Dr. Babe, and I've got Tom McCallum with me, so we're having a conversation about masculine and feminine stereotypes. I took it in a way talking about the double standard from more of like a relationship standpoint, maybe sexuality, but I'm sort of keen to hear where you take this topic and what you've been thinking about.
Pretty broad topic, but I'm not sure I've got as cool a nickname as you.
That's okay. We can call you the Tom. That seems to be common now.
The Tom.
The famous Tom.
The famous Tom.
Yes.
So, I'm not sure. You give us something to start off with.
Well, one of the topics that I think seems to be really relevant right now is kind of the masculine and the feminine energies. Sort of the assumption that masculinity does not include emotionality, it doesn't include vulnerability, and really where that conversation has been progressing lately has been more of an inclusive one in which masculine and feminine energies can be related. They can be contained in the same person rather than so divisive. And I know that some of the conversations we've had leading up to this, you've sort of been seeing some of the same things, even just in your own experience.
Yeah, I mean, I've been seeing this for years in the work that I do, working with leaders, and I've been experiencing it very much myself in the last year. I've been on quite a personal journey. The way I was brought up was that the male role was very black and white, if you call it that. Right. It was very much down a certain path, and men were expected to be a certain way in every area of life. A lot of what we talk about is business and roles as a husband or father, etc. And it's, my awareness now at 50 years old, I'm kind of going, I wish I knew this when I was 25. I wish I understood this. It's very, very different.
Well, it's not too late. You can integrate this now.
I'm in early life,
yes.
Right? And this is not new though, right? There are no new ideas. This is thousands of years old. So if you look at yin-yang symbols, it's this blending of masculine, feminine energy.
Right.
So, what does that actually mean? What would it mean to you?
Well, it depends on what part of my life you ask me this question, right? So previously to my awakening, so to say, I would have probably assumed that masculine was more dominant, it was more aggressive, whereas feminine was more demure, modest. And interestingly enough, that kind of flipped completely after I had this sort of enlightening, where I realized that the feminine energy is really powerful and actually has been suppressed for so long, sort of misrepresented often in sort of mass media or general knowledge, thinking about women being that soft, unspoken energy, but having more of a sensual and powerful sensuality that brings soulful earthiness into the mix. So now I can really celebrate that, whereas before I thought of feminine as something that I wanted to dismiss in myself. So I've invited more of a feminine energy because I embrace it, seeing it as a powerful thing. Yeah,
perfect. And for me, the awareness is that that masculine and feminine energies sit in all of us.
Definitely.
So we have to embody both of them.
Yes.
And it's the embracing of that And it's the embracing of that is not something I've seen in modern society very much. So, for example, empathy is, for me, and I'm no expert in this field, it's all relatively new to me as well, is that empathy is very much a feminine energy trait, actually listening to people with care and understanding. So you can then flip it into, for a male, for example, then flip it into masculine energy form of giving direction without arrogance and aggressiveness.
Definitely, and that's the cliche often in marital therapy when I'm working with clients. You know, you'll see that sort of dynamic play out, whereas the woman is the nurturer, maybe the nagger, but the man doesn't really listen to her, and he tells directions and just sort of gives the answer rather than sitting there with her and holding her hand through maybe a problem, not literally, but so to speak. And yeah, you know, that dynamic can be shifted when you explore these concepts with them. Really, it's about facing the double standard in some ways, if you look at it from a topical sense of what we're talking about today. The assumptions there that men should be one way and women should be the other way, or if a woman is maybe more masculine in her energy, people will, you know, reject that. People won't accept that, and vice versa, where a man who's more sensitive or empathic might be rejected as well. So that's where I think some of these stereotypes create problems for people internally in their sort of mental and emotional wellness.
So if we take that topically right now, it's back to school. Colleges are going back. That means there's new students going to college. That means they have to go on campus and see fraternity houses hang banners outside there, which emphasize the rape culture in colleges and the bro culture. And we've just seen that
the Stanford case?
The Stanford kid, who of course is named as a elite swimmer, not a rapist.
Right.
And he got 3 months in jail. Okay.
Well, he got 6 months and then got out in 3.
And he got out the other
yesterday, I think.
Yesterday, when at the time of filming. Yeah. So when you look at all of that, it'd be very easy to say that we're going backwards. All right. My sense is we're not. You know, human behavior is that things go to extremes before you get growth and expansion. People,
like the pendulum.
People go, they push way away. So, personally, if I'm among a bunch of guys, my peer group, my age, whatever, and I'm out for a couple of drinks with them, or you know, on the golf course, whatever, we're to a lot of people are still at a point where they're having bro conversations, and that term is a relatively new one, but doesn't change. They talk about everything is talked about on the way men are supposed to talk level. Right?
How is that? Tell me. Fill me in.
Basically, you'll spend your whole time talking sports, or talking about girls, but normally, or women, but normally not in any kind of depth. But it's pretty vague, to be honest. I find guy conversations in a standard sense pretty vacuous. Right?
But do they talk about sex? Because I always get this.
Nope.
They don't. So I have heard that women talk about sex more than men do.
I've sat as a fly on the wall in a room full of women, and gone, and they've forgotten I was there, and gone, holy cow!
You were surprised.
I was going, wow. So it's not just the graphical nature of it, but women will talk about emotions. They'll actually, you know, and again, we're being generic here. We're talking about women and men and double standards. So there's a huge opportunity, as you've just expressed with your own personal experience, there's a huge opportunity for men to embrace their feminine side. And as I say, this is ancient wisdom, feminine energy. And there's a huge opportunity for women to you know, not dismiss, not say they need to be demure, etc., but actually be, one of the languages that I've heard used is just to be a large container, right? You know, to actually contain all of this understanding, energy, love, etc. And then masculine energy in a positive or divine sense is about providing direction and vision and energy and inspiration, right, to carry things forward. The whole concept of it, though, if you then get into relationships, is it's a side-by-side concept. It's not, you know, the woman walking 4 steps behind.
Right. So man and woman being equal.
Yeah. So if
because they contain all of that simultaneously.
Exactly. So if you lift it to the concept we've been talking about around those masculine and feminine energies being contained in men and contained in women, then what on earth are we doing expecting one to be better than the other, or one to have a more important role than the other? Because you actually, and so while on the surface we're seeing that really negative sort of college fraternity type behavior, on the other hand, look at what's happening in our world with female leaders, right? You know, it's no longer, it's gone in one generation. Yes, we're not on this topic today, but there's a black president in the US, and it was like, okay, great, he's the best candidate, right, to many people, right? There are female leaders in business, there are female leaders in politics, and it's like, okay.
But this reminds me of the swinging pendulum, because I think that before that sort of idea that I had, especially about sort of rejecting femininity because it was that demure, modest type of femininity. So then women became very empowered, and they got the vote, and then they put on their suits, and they went into the workplace, and became A-type personalities as well, competing with men, although obviously there are inequities there in the workplace still that exist. Mm-hmm. So being then, from that perspective, the really strong woman who's more of embracing their masculinity, right? Mm-hmm. As almost a protest to how they were treated prior, right? Yeah. Now it's like the majority of those women that maybe even I was more drawn to, the strong women that had more masculine tendencies, now I think are starting to soften. I'm seeing that paralleled in a lot of people, a lot of women who are now embracing both elements and learning how to create that balance. So I'm hoping that some of these women leaders are not forced to stay stuck in that sort of reactionary, aggressive, masculine state, and that they are able to also embrace that balance and come to their potential.
I'm really blessed in the work that I do. The predominant work I do is work individually with business leaders. And I'm guided by people living and passed away. My great guide died last year, and his great language was be more you. And when I'm actually coaching or otherwise supporting leaders, I'm not consulting and telling them what to do. I'm looking for them to bring out who they truly are. And I do find, to your point, that if I'm working with, often in large businesses or other leadership roles, people are up in their 40s or 50s by the time they reach that level. And when women are at that level, and there aren't many of them, I tend to work with disproportionately more women, not given that they might be 20% of that level, but I work with maybe 40, 50% of my clients women. I do find they still have the thing about the power suit and I need to be more of a man than the man, the swinging pendulum.
Exactly. And
it's really quite amazing when sometimes you ask them lots of questions and you listen to them and you talk to them and you're really listening, and you realize after a while that what has brought them their success and what they're achieving has got nothing to do with them aping the masculine tendencies.
Right.
It's actually got everything to do with them showing up with their feminine energy, allied with the sort of power dress type A, and not type A necessarily. Well, let's not get lost in terms. There's a really good friend of mine, I won't go into individuals here, who absolutely is perfect at that. And when I first met them years ago, we were talking at length, and they actually felt that it was their technical abilities, right, in what they did that raised them to the top. And when they actually started looking at their abilities with energy and reading people, and the intuitive side, but also you're talking about things like energy and vibration, and I won't get into a big spiritual conversation here, but they had such powerful energy, which was really an embodied feminine energy that allowed them to speak the language that was necessary when they were addressing audiences to reach people. But it was actually, they'd unconsciously embraced it, and that was the secret of their success. Once they started going, it's okay for me to live both of these, then it unleashed amazing, awesome results and potential.
Yeah, and do you think that workplaces in general, that they realize that what breeds success is this side of things, whether it's a man or a woman bringing it forward, right? I mean, in my work, when I work in consultation with businesses, I find that they're typically dismissing of the emotional intelligence content. We're seeing more and more clients now inviting that sort of conversation into the workplace and starting to train people on emotional intelligence, which is similar, right? It's basically the same thing, the emotional content.
Whether you call it EQ, whether you call it, the classic piece of language, soft skills.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? as if it's off to one side and it's not
Right.
important. You know,
But what would happen if we called it feminine skills?
that would go even further, wouldn't it?
No,
People are not ready for it.
Right. But it would breed success. So, I mean, why don't they see the result and then welcome it?
Well, I think what's, you know, I believe in this, and all I can do and others can do is bring it forward. And it's not, again, it's not one or the other. I don't believe in all conversations. It's this integration piece. So, you know, it's really unfortunate that we do have a double standard. There are glass ceilings, right? And we have a double standards around relationships, etc., right? In many ways, and I know that's a big topic for you, right? But you know, if we look at this, whether it's work or whether it's day by day, look at this conversation, right? This is a side-by-side conversation, right? This is two people who feel very equal to have a conversation, and it's got nothing to do with the fact that you're female and I'm male, right? So, you know, if all of us can just show up this way, then it's going to make a difference. Sometimes it's really unfortunate, but I find it unfortunate. Sometimes we have to couch things in language people will accept. Okay.
Very true.
But let's just pick, you know, another thing from my great guide Ed Percival was heat up the hot spots. Don't try to heat up the cold spots.
Right. So what does that mean exactly?
So what it means is, just imagine you're presenting to a room full of people, or you've got a workshop that you're working with, and there's people there with their arms folded and their, you know, legs crossed and all of the negative body language. A lot in old-fashioned presentation skills training, they would teach presenters to focus on those people because they were cold spots in the room. But think of this in terms of physics and science. Which is easier, to heat up a cold spot or to heat up somebody who's already warm?
Definitely the warm.
And the one who's already warm, just imagine this, they're already warm. You heat them up to the point where they're radiating. And they're shining out, their heat's shining off them. The whole room's going to get it.
That makes so much sense.
So
I like that.
if you believe anything, if there's anything you believe in life, and you find people who are kindred spirits on this, just, you know, focus on them, help their light shine, right? Just, you know, heat up the hot spots. So in this particular area, it is, if there are double standards out there and you have people who still believe that, and speaking without judgment on this, people have very deep-seated lenses. You know, I go back to the generation before me and the generation before them. The way they were brought up, people have very, very deep patterns they need to unpick. You're, you know, highly trained in this area. It takes a while to unpick patterns. But when people start waking up and actually seeing things differently, and they want to do things differently, well, those are the people I'd focus on. I wouldn't worry about the people. It's just too hard to worry about changing people who aren't ready. Focus on the people who are ready.
Definitely, and that happens a lot in therapy as well. If a client, they may walk through the door, but if they're not really ready, then it's pretty short-lived, and it's, you know, it's important to make them feel like it's okay for them to come back when they're ready, but not forcing it is important.
Yeah.
Now, when sort of getting back to the double standard, just taking a different spin on it a little bit, there's a lot going on right now that I think relates to that, because we all fall prey, I think, to the double standard without even thinking about it. No matter how attuned we are to these issues. I mean, there was something in the Olympics about the double standard, you know, looking at objectifying men versus women, whereas women are always defending themselves and trying to say that we need to stop objectifying women, but then we're, you know, eager to ooh and ah over a sexy man in the Olympics, and there was a big story about that. But also you're talking about politics and how leaders such as, I don't know, Hillary Clinton may be considered more of a masculine energy that she's bringing forward to her race, and maybe, I don't know, maybe some of the criticisms of her approach, her behaviors, her style, her personality. Yeah,
I watched her speech. I'm not a political person, but I watched her speech at the Democratic Convention. I'm fascinated with how people show up and present themselves. Her style is her style. You know, she's pretty introverted. She's very direct. She's very management-oriented. She doesn't have the leadership rhetoric of a Barack Obama. Right, so she isn't going to shine and radiate to the crowd. But if a man was like that and brought those administrative management type skills, right, they wouldn't get the, I won't use any swear words, but they wouldn't get the real negativity that she received and from the analysis afterwards. there is the. I mean, I absolutely believe. It's if I find it like it's ironic I'm saying this, right? So
Okay.
I'm a 6'3" white male of Anglo-Saxon, well, Celtic, but Anglo-Saxon descent, really. Okay, who speaks English as a first language. I've got every advantage. There's some stat, I'm not sure it's bang on. 92% of Fortune 500 CEOs are over 6 feet.
Really?
And guess what percentage of them are male? American presidents, they're all tall. Right, male presidents, right? I've got every possible advantage, and so I can't really fully empathize with what it's like. I know a lot of women who've been very successful, but the old adage is you have to work twice as hard to get half as far. Now, I truly believe it's changing, and we're on the verge of real breakthroughs in this area, and I love the fact you're leading on this. But we're also on the breakthrough of, I talked just for a moment, I believe in a real breakthrough in consciousness around the world. So what happens before you get that, the pendulum swings the other way. You get, extremes that are going on. But if you look, I have great faith in the younger generation, folk in their 20s and younger. They just don't get it. Why would people act that way? They're breaking free of all these patterns. They're seeing success stories. They're seeing strong women who embody all of these things, whether it's Beyonce or Michelle Obama or other people who are just not sticking to the stereotypes. They're saying, I'm just going to be more me.
Yeah, there's definitely a silver lining to the younger generations. I think technology has its downside, but it is sort of freeing the mentality. And I think that in the future we'll see that balance once it settles.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that I'd be interested to hear is really maybe your reflection of how you think I'm bringing this to light. I know for me, talking about a little bit about where I came from and sort of the changes that I've stepped into is the perfectionism. And I think that tendency to really project oneself as a perfect human being, making all the right decisions and doing what they should do was a real masculine trait of mine. But now I think moving towards this more authentic state of mind where you're able to present yourself, whatever it is, whether it's strong or emotional, it doesn't have to be right or wrong. It's just who you are, and that's really what matters.
So I'm going to say something to you, and you and I have known each other about 3 or 4 years now, and I'm going to say something to you on camera that I've not actually said to you before.
Okay.
Don't be scared.
Brace myself.
But it's much easier now. You frame a question, it just suddenly brings forward an awareness for me of something through a rearview mirror. You were always driving hard to achieve certain things. You took years, very committed, and now you're Dr. Babe. And the doctor isn't just a term, you actually are a doctor. You have a postgrad, right? And you put a ton of time into that, and you built your career, and you built yourself up something very successful. And you built it in a frame that I think subconsciously you felt you had to achieve.
Yes.
Now, around 2 years ago, I noticed you just said, to hell with all of that, right? I'm going to be me, right? And you put yourself out there, and you've been very public with, and not just to your close friends, but you've been public about the fact I'm out there, I'm going to be me, all right? So if you put that into one word, it's vulnerability, all right? And there is nothing stronger than a vulnerable human, right? Male or female. There is strength. The weak people who are demonstrating lack of strength are the people who are unwilling to be vulnerable. So they have vacuous conversations, whether it doesn't matter what sex they are. If they're having things which are just surface, small talk conversations are fun, all right? And you can fun. It's great having fun and laughing and lightweight stuff. I'm not a particularly lightweight guy. It's great fun. But if you're avoiding conversations because you don't want to get real and you don't want to be authentic, then you're it's the Marianne Williamson stuff. It's, our greatest fear. And I can't quote the quote, but it's really let your light shine. And as you do your fears, you're liberated from your own fears, and then unconsciously you liberate others from their fears. I'm mixing up the quote, but does that make sense?
It does.
So being vulnerable in an extended period of time then allows you to flip your energy into going, you can come forward and say, and here's what I'm going to do. And by the way, nobody's ever going to use the term, which even I found myself using twice last week with women I was talking to, of bossy, which, just as an aside, is a term nobody would ever use around a man. Right? So you're coming forward and saying, here's what I believe, here's what's going to happen. But that was sparked by you going, I'm going to break out of a mold and I'm going to be me. And now, what does that mean? You're doing a TV show, and it's awesome.
And thank you for being my first guest on this TV show.
It's an absolute pleasure and a privilege.
I hope that you do come back. We might have another topic for you to join us for.
I would love to.
Maybe with another guest or two.
Anything.
So I really appreciate it, and all your reflections have not gone, unappreciated.
Thank you.
It was so great having Tom on our very first show. I've only known him a few years, but in that time, I've really come to appreciate his perspective on things. It's unique, courageous, and challenging. I certainly admire his ability to bring a sense of humanity and emotional intelligence into the professional realm. Although we discussed how the double standard may play out mostly from a leadership context, I did hear him deconstruct what is masculine and what is feminine in a way that I believe is relevant on a wider scope. There's always more to explore, and as the season progresses, we'll be looking at issues from what is a modern relationship to healthy sex and accepting our imperfections. My purpose in doing this show is to confront our humanity with authenticity, courage, and humor instead of perpetuating expectations that are unrealistic and unhealthy, which ultimately make us miserable and complacent. So let's turn things around. I'm Dr. Babe, and you can interact with me on social media and tell me what's on your mind. If you have questions, comments, or topics you'd like me to explore, message me on Facebook at Dr. Taylor Burrowes, on Instagram at Dr. Babe Love Life, Twitter, same Dr. Babe Love Life, or WordPress, which is drbabelove.wordpress.com. Thanks for watching. Join me weekly for new episodes and make sure to love life.